Last week we looked at our attitudes towards our finances, and more importantly, our attitude to who is in charge of our life and how that affects our decisions and how we use our resources. Because when God is in control, we fully obey, and that includes how we use our finances and giving back to God. And we saw that we are simply managers and are responsible to use what we have for His glory. Now, here's what we're going to do this week. This week, we're going to practically look at how we can get out of this borrowing cycle and be free from the bondage of debt. Here's what Proverbs says about that. It says, Proverbs 22, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." And that's exactly true. When we owe money, we are beholden to someone else because we owe them something. I know for my boys, they will give something to one of the other brothers for something else later, and usually it's way more than what it's actually worth. I will give you this, and you give me $5 later. And the boys, they want something now. They can't wait, and so they take it, and they're like, no, we're not ripping each other off, boys. We're not doing that. But that's what happens. We want something now, and so we borrow to get it, and we put ourselves in this terrible debt cycle. And God knew from the beginning that's not how it should be. Deuteronomy 15 says this, "At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. That is how it is to be done." That's what God said. This is how you do it to His people. "Every creditor shall cancel any loan they have made to a fellow Israelite. They shall not require payment from anyone among their own people, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed." Now, just so you understand, every 7 years, all the debts were gone. They were completely gone. God knew His people were not going to be functioning right when they had this weight of debt on them. He knew it would crush them, and He had a plan so that they didn't have to live with that. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking to yourselves, I like that idea. Let's go back to that. Every 7 years, all our debts are gone. That's unfortunately not how it is today. We're not meant to have debt hanging around our necks. Whenever I think of this illustration of debt, it helps me to think of this, of a millstone wrapped around your neck. The Bible gives that illustration for other things. But if you don't know what a millstone is, it's this giant round rock with a hole in the middle. And I imagine a chain through that hole wrapped around my neck, and I'm in a pool or in water and I'm drowning. If you're a big mafia fan, you're going to sleep with the fishes, That's that idea. This millstone is dragging you down, and that's what debt does. You see, that was not God's plan from the beginning, and it's not God's plan today either. And today we'll look at some practical things to help us get this stone from around our neck. Now, I know people are in all different situations. Some of you are already debt-free, and that's awesome. And you know how amazing that is. Some of us have debt, a lot of debt, and some of you have not even started yet to get debt in your life. And if you haven't started and you have no debt, I'm asking you, think about not doing that. Try to figure a way not to accumulate debt as you are going forward. But just so I'm clear, I'm not one standing up here telling you all this because I've got it figured out. My family, we still have debt. We believe that by this summer, all the debt we'll have left is our home and our student loans. And yes, I'm 46, still paying student loans. But we're working our debt, and we're going to be aggressively attacking that. And so we don't have it all figured out, but we don't want to be under that bondage of debt anymore, and we don't want you to be there either. Because we know what can happen when families are debt-free, when the church is debt-free. We can do amazing things for God with the resources that He lets us manage. But we have to make sure we understand this first, that choices we make today affect tomorrow. Choices we make today affect tomorrow. And we talk a lot about choices here because we believe God has given us free will. We can do bad or we can do good. And it's the small choices that add up over time. It's the little things we choose to do that others don't that make a big difference in our lives. So if you have kids in school or grandkids in school, when I was a kid, my parents would not get the report card and be able to see my grades until a midterm or the end of the semester. Well, now everybody can just go online and you get up to the minute grades. Here's the only problem with that. Sometimes it leads to poor choices in my house. Because my kids will look and go, I've got an A, so if I get a 0 on this next assignment and don't do it, I've still got an A. There's a problem with that, you see. Because I've tried to explain to my kids, life happens. There's going to be a moment when you can't get this assignment because something happens. You're sick or you forgot or you just had a poor assignment. And if you keep cutting it so close all the time, life happens. And then you're really in trouble. And that's kind of how it is with debt. What happens is we're thinking, oh, we're okay, we can handle this, and then life happens. And there's major problems. And so our choices today affect tomorrow. You see, in our financial situation is a series of choices. And there's definitely things that happen outside of our control, but most of our financial situation is our choice. For example, I can choose to get a coffee every morning for $5, and $5 may be cheap. I don't know. I don't even drink coffee, but I can choose to do that. So let's say I do that each weekday, and let's call that 250 days a year for easy math. That is $1,250 on coffee in 1 year. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying you should do that or shouldn't, because some of you are thinking, trust me, it is well worth that for my family not to have to put up with me without my coffee. I get that. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I am simply saying our daily choices affect our finances. We had two boys that were my brothers, and they came and stayed with us, and we didn't go out to eat every night. This is before we had our own kids. And they were like, well, why aren't we going to go out to eat? Well, we choose not to go out to eat every night. And I said, so we can save our money, and then as a family, we're going to go do something fun while you guys are here. So we ate at home each night. We had food. And then we were able to go. We went to this go-kart place. We took them someplace really fun. We were trying to explain to them how we chose to use our finances. And it's those choices that add up. I mean, do you know people who call into work, all the time? It's mostly because they don't want to go, and then at the end of the month, they complain that they don't have any money. You see, it's the choices. Daily choices add up. Our choices yesterday affect our finances tomorrow. Our choices yesterday affect our finances tomorrow. Have you ever gone to bed with a house a mess? Normally, when you wake up, it's still a mess. The house cleaning fairies have not shown up at your house. I wish they would. And that would be awesome. But normally if you go to bed at night and it's a mess the next day. And we have to be intentional about cleaning up our mess. We're not going to say we have all this debt and all these problems and not change anything and not fix it, and the next day it's all going to be gone. We have to do something about it. And we have to make a choice to be different and to do things different, to get out of debt and to stay out of debt. Matthew 7 says this. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like the foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose up, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. You see, that's the choice we have. We can be wise builders and build our life and specifically build our finances on God's rock-solid plan. Or we can be foolish and deal with the outcome of building on the sand. That is building on our own ideas or how we think we should manage money, not God's plan. But see, when we do that, there will be problems. God has clearly shown us that we should be getting out of debt. Proverbs 22, the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is slave to the lender. So let's just take a few minutes to see what we can do about the debt we have. And for some of you, I know what I'm going to talk about today may be very basic, but you have to realize that there's some people in this room that this is not basic, that this is something that they may have never heard of before. Some of you today will be going, oh, wow, that's unbelievable. And others, like I said, it's very basic. If this is basic for you, I would love to talk to you about it if you have all this already figured out, because you can help and mentor somebody else who is struggling with this. That's what the church does. Where I am weak, you are strong, and where I'm strong, you're weak. So if you've got all this figured out today, this has not hit you, let me know, and I'm going to help put you with somebody that you can help. So how do we deal with debt? Some of what we're going to talk about is from Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. It's a great series to go through. It's a great study if you want to dive into some more practical ways to help with this. So to begin with, I want to create some vision with you. I want to create what could possibly happen. And I want to take a minute and I want to explain compound interest real quick. I want to explain compound interest. When you see this, you will be driven to be the one getting interest and not paying it. So watch this. So we have a compound interest chart up here, okay? So if we say you have $20,000 Okay, we're not going to add anything to that. Let's say you have that by the time you're 25 years old, okay? So you save up $20,000 by the time you're 25. You don't have a lot of expenses. You're saving your money. So and you're going to retire at 65. So that's 40 years. Let's say the interest rate is only 7%. Now here's the thing. The average interest rate on a Roth IRA is 7 to 10%. That means you're going to have a -5 some years. That means you're going to have a 20 some years. It just goes up and down. The average is 7 to 10%. So let's go with the low end. If it is only compounded one time annually, which that makes a huge difference. We're not even going to get into that. And so you know, this is a very basic illustration of compound interest. Here's what you have. If you have $20,000 at the age of 25 you put in and you never touch it again, you never add another cent to it, you have $300,000 basically when you retire. That's it. $20,000 turns into almost $300,000 with compound interest. Now let's say here, let's go right here to the annual addition and let's add $1,000 a year. We just add $1,000. So 40 times 1,000 is 40,000. There we go. Let's hit the calculate and see what happens. $513,000 to retire on. All right, now let's say this. Let's say 20,000 is too much. So let's go back. Let's make that 10. And then let's say you can only get 10 by the age of 25. Let's make the annual addition 2,000. But let's say the interest rate is 9. None of this is crazy right here. Now hit calculate. $1 million. $1 million. This is $2,000 a year. That is not even $200 a month in savings. And at only $10,000 by the time you're 25. It is unbelievable. If you are a student in here, a kid, listen to this. When you are in high school and you work and you put your money in a Roth IRA, by the time you're 22, you literally never have to add to your retirement again. It's unbelievable what can happen with this. I want to share this with you because it is so amazing. It is so amazing. And so how do we get out of debt so that we can get to a point where we can begin to do this for our kids, or we can begin to do this for ourselves? Because when we do this, we can create generational wealth for our kids. And I don't mean for them to go and buy cars. I mean for them to continue kingdom work. I mean, how amazing would it be for this to be sitting there when they retire? They're like, man, I can go do whatever God has called me to go do, wherever that happens to be, and whatever that is. You see, that's what we can do as a family as we begin to understand this idea of compound interest and generational wealth. So how do we do this? I mean, unfortunately, again, our debt is not wiped away in 7 years. That's unfortunate. It would be awesome. So what can we do? And the first thing we do is this. The first thing we do is tithe. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But concerning the debt part, the first thing we do is to create an emergency fund of $1,000. Maybe it's $1,500. Ramsey's always said $1,000, but the way things cost now, $1,500 might be better. So you start an emergency fund. And here's why you do that. Life's going to happen. Life is going to happen. You know what? Your tires are going to go out on your car. Your refrigerator will stop working at some point. Things will happen in your life. You cannot control that. I mean, you can only put so much duct tape on your dryer, all right? At some point, it's going to stop. And you need to have the emergency fund. An emergency fund is not for vacations. It's not for going out to eat. It is for literal necessities and emergencies. You're going to have a medical bill. You're going to have some. The reason you save that up is this. When something comes up, you use it instead of getting in debt again. So the first thing you'll want to do is save up to that $1,000 or $1,500, whatever you decide works for your family. And then you have that to pull on when things happen. Once you get there, then you begin to pay some stuff off. But here's what else you can do. You can begin to figure out ways that you can make cuts in your finances. You can get rid of that cup of coffee, get rid of cable channels, or monthly payments to something that you aren't using. I mean, many people pay for a gym membership and never use it. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We've all done that. Because if we have the membership, then that means we're trying to get healthy, right? We just have the membership. We don't actually have to show up. And when somebody asks you, yeah, I'm a member of that gym. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it looks like or even if it's open anymore, but I know I'm paying them every month. And so look at something like that. Maybe it's this. Maybe you get a refund every year from the government on your taxes. You know that if you get a refund every year on your taxes, you are giving them interest-free money, right? So if you are giving them interest-free money, you can change it where you get that extra $20 a week, and that $20 a week can then go to paying off things that you're paying interest on. There's a lot of ways to begin to do this, and so there's ways to cut, ways to look. Make sure you aren't paying bank fees or overdraft penalties. There's ways to cut costs. We just have to look for them, and we have to build on the rock. God's wisdom, God's planning. We have to be intentional about building our financial plan. Use wisdom and good choices that pay off in the long run. So we have our savings there. We have our $1,000. Let's call it $1,000 in our emergency fund. Then the second thing we do is to actually start paying off the debt. We pay it off as aggressively as we can. Now, there's all kinds of ways to start. Some people are like, hey man, start with the highest interest. Some people are like, start with the smallest payment. I recommend starting with the smallest payment that actually has interest. If you're like us, right now we do have a little bit of debt. We have a medical thing, but it's zero interest. It's zero interest for a certain amount of time. And so I'm not going to pay that off early because I've got free money from them. I'm going to pay off something that has interest, but I want to pay something off small. You know why? Once I'm done, I actually feel really good. After you pay it off, you feel pretty good. You're like, good. And now, let's say I've been putting $100 a month towards that. I have another $100 in free cash flow now that can go towards something else. Now, here's the trick about those no interest things. A lot of times, at the end of the 2 years or whatever it happens to be, you have to pay interest on the total amount of what you borrowed, not what's left, if you don't have it paid off. So you have to make sure that you have it all paid off by the time you get there. Like at Lowe's. A lot of people have Lowe's credit card. If you buy a certain thing, 6 months, interest-free, at the end of those 6 months, you might all of a sudden get a huge payment on interest that you have to pay because it's not paid off. So we have to be on top of that. So just start paying it off as much as you can towards those. And here's the thing. I know this sounds really simple. It sounds really simple. And many things in life are. We just have to decide that we're going to do it. We're going to do it. So go over your finances and see where you can cut and what debt you can pay off first. And you'll be happy when you get some paid off. It just frees up your things. I mean, how happy are you when your entire check is not taken by bills and you have no option in that? I mean, it's so liberating and so free. And not only this, when you are debt-free, when you are working through this, not only will your finances be better, your relationships will be better. Like I said, there's two things that couples fight over in marriage. Money and sex. Those are the two things that you fight over. Wouldn't it be great if you're only fighting over sex? No, I'm just kidding. But at least take care of the money part and work together. Your relationships and your mental health will be better. Now, here's the third thing, and you may not have heard this before. Here's the third thing you need to do to get out of debt. Make sure you are insured properly. I know that sounds really weird. It sounded really weird to me too. This buddy of mine, he has a company, and to be his client, you have to start with $1 million. That's the minimum you can start with to be his client. He manages all kinds of wealth. Super smart guy. And we had this conversation one time, and he explained to me how this works. He said, you understand, the reason so many people get into debt is a lot of things that aren't even necessarily they were responsible for. Sometimes it's an accident or a medical thing that they can't cover, and now they have to declare bankruptcy. They have to do all these different things. He said, make sure you are insured properly. I mean, make sure whatever your car insurance is, it covers what your plan is. If you've got a hoopty, and you don't care what happens to it, then fine, low insurance. But if you have it, make sure it's enough to pay it off, or make sure it's enough to buy you a new one. Whether it's health insurance, disability insurance, whatever it is. Because here's why. Honestly, most of us could probably find $20 a month. Most of us probably could not find $5,000 or $10,000 all of a sudden if something came up. That's why insurance is important. So make sure that you have the proper insurance set up for you. And again, this is wise planning and building on a firm foundation. And if you need help making a budget or need more information, man, let me know. We have people in the church that can help you. We can guide you towards things like financial peace. We can give you worksheets. There's all kinds of ways because we know what can happen in your life when you're debt-free. And I'm not just talking about on the church side, I'm talking about you personally. We care enough about you that we want you to have the abundant life and be able to do what God has called you to do. But the first key to all this whole journey, first key to the whole journey of being debt-free is knowing this. That the key to being free from financial bondage starts with tithing. That's where it starts. This is the key to building our finance on God's wisdom. This is the rock that our foundation of stewardship starts with. And if you don't do this, you are building on the sand. It is the decision that will change your life. It changes priorities. It changes your financial management. It changes your heart. It changes the way you look at your income. It changes who is actually in charge of your life. And we talked about this last week, that the Old Testament talks about it. In the New Testament, Jesus affirms it and encourages us. That was in Matthew 23:23. And we talked about a tithe. The tithe is 10%. And if you're not giving 10%, then it isn't a tithe. Jesus didn't say stop doing it. Instead, he said continue and to love also. Go above what the law was asking. And tithing is part of our Christian walk, and it's part of our maturity and our discipleship. And God says this: you want to get everything else fixed? All your debt, all the problem? Start with trusting me. Start with trusting me. And we have to let God lead us in our finances, or we will still be under the bondage of debt. And we see how this is played out in the early church. 1 Corinthians 16 says this: now about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Now you can see that's what they did. They said, keeping with your income. That's a percentage. God made a percentage, not an amount, because he knows everybody's income is different. Some people are really good at making money. Some people are terrible at it. You know, it's just how it goes. He says a percentage. And they took it up on the first day of the week, and that meant Sunday when they met and worshiped together. Now, they were paid daily back then, just so you know. They were paid daily. Like at the end of the day, Jesus even gave parables about that. At the end of the day, they would get their money from whatever it was. And so at the end of the week, they asked, give a tithe to God on what you were paid every single day that week. And I know that's not the case here. Some people were paid monthly. Some are paid every week. Some are paid every 2 weeks. So for us, our family, we are paid every 2 weeks. But what we chose to do was we took our tithe and divided it so that it goes out every single Sunday morning. And I've told you before, we have it set up on automatic giving. Before my feet hit the floor on Sunday morning, I have already worshiped God with giving. He's already gotten our offering for that week, our tithe for that week, before my feet even hit the floor. And so we decided to divide it up, so that each week it was that. It doesn't matter how you do that. If you get paid once a month and you want to tithe once a month, that's awesome. If you want to do it every week, it's fine. You want to do it every other week when you get a check, whatever it does, it works for you. But I would encourage to think about the idea of the online. You can do it on the app. You can do it online because it's automatic and you don't forget. If you've been in church for a while and been a giver or a tither, I guarantee you have taken checks home that you planned on dropping in the offering plate. I know we've done that as the pastor. You're like, oh, wait a second. I got to take that in. And here's the other, when you're gone, it continues on. You're continually giving and tithing automatically. And so if you miss, that helps as well, and it helps the church as we continue on. It is a way to worship even when you are not here. Now here's the thing. I know we have some newer people and some people that might be thinking this. Sometimes people are a little concerned about what the church does with the tithe. I mean, isn't that the whole thing? All the church, all they want is your money, all this type of stuff. I get it. We all want to know that God is being honored by what we give. We all, if we're invested, we want to know what's going on, and we want to know what is happening. So here's the deal. Our church's finances are an open book. Like if you say, hey, I have a question about what you're spending, okay, we'll get it for you. You can see it. It's an open book. Let me give you some general insight, though. I drive a really sweet 2012 Kia minivan. I know you wish you were as cool as me to be a 46-year-old man driving a minivan. I get it. Now, if I start driving a new Mercedes and I'm all blinged out in gold chains, you should ask questions about our church's finances. And you should ask questions if I've been hitting the head really hard. Both of those. Some churches are sinfully structured so that the pastor gets rich off of the increase in giving. That is not the case here. That is why we have a biblical model of leadership with elders overseeing the church. It's kind of funny. For most pastors, they have to justify what they need to get paid to survive, but at the same time justify not getting paid too much. Now here's the thing. This church is taking care of us, and we are so grateful for that. I cannot tell you how appreciative we are of that. We can pay our bills, and we can feed our 4 boys, which is not easy. And we can do that. But the leadership has been responsible with the giving we have had. They've been fair in compensation and in judiciously handling our finances. If the elders had not made wise decisions on finances, we would not have been able to pay off $200,000 in 18 months. At the same time, we've got new air conditioning, we've got this children's wing of stuff we're doing, new lighting, new carpet, new paint, all these different things. We've done the, out there in the parking lot, we redid that a while back. We bought a new fridge, a lot of people don't know about. It's $5,000 for the size of the fridge that we had to get. All those things while we were paying off. I mean, some of those before, but we've done all those things. So the church and the elders have made excellent decisions on how to use our finances. You can see what is happening around to see that your investment is being put to kingdom work. The increase in student and children's ministry is unbelievable. We are running about 20% of our weekend attendance in student ministry. Let me make sure you understand this, though. Most churches, think they have the best youth pastor in the world if they run 10% of their Sunday morning attendance. We are running 20% of our Sunday morning attendance in youth ministry on Wednesday nights right now. It is unbelievable. Your investment financially is allowing us to do things with our kids and with the children. You can see the funds are being used, but at the same time, I want you to know this, that we as a church, we tithe. Our church tithes. We give over 10% of our income to missions, both local and foreign. We support local food ministries and other services that help people in our area. We help people in our own church that need help as well. We support the church camp, Bible colleges. We send money overseas to missionaries, reaching people all around the world. Your giving is going to help the church at large, as our church, but as well as the church around the world and in our community. So here's why I say all that for this. I want to encourage you to tithe, and I want to encourage you to tithe, first of all, to honor God. Second of all, knowing that the resources that you give are being put to good use to make a difference in our community and around the world. You see, you are worshiping God and furthering His kingdom. And if you've been reading the ABCs, you've probably read where he talks about this idea of tithing. And if you've been reading it, you may have seen the part where he says he encourages businesses even to tithe off profits. And I agree. I know many businesses that have done that. I may have told you this story before. We had I was at Chandler, and we had a family that sold a business and made a lot of money off of it. And so they wrote out a tithe check. The tithe check was about $3.5 million. And they gave it to the pastor. The pastor, was a little shocked, and he was like, oh, wow, I mean, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And they just looked at him like, well, yeah, but we tithe. You've been teaching us that for 30 years. You see, that's what happens. They'd been taught and trained that they tithe and God had blessed them and they gave it back. In my family personally, this is what we do. If we get a gift from someone or an unexpected blessing, we tithe off of it. We tithe off tax returns. We tithe off stimulus checks. You name it, we give back because we want God to continue to bless us. We want God to continue to bless us. We tithe on it. And I cannot encourage you enough to do this. If you own a business, I encourage you, tithe off of the profits of the business and see what God does for you. You'll see God at work in your life when you have this type of commitment. And one question that often comes up in this, and people ask this question is this: should I tithe off of the gross or net income? You know the difference? Pre-tax, post-tax, all that stuff. Here's my answer to that. Do you want gross blessings or net blessings? Which one do you want? I don't know about you, but you can decide. But God has said, trust me and give me your first fruits. And I know I would want as many blessings from God as I could get. And we know that when we trust Him with our finances, we are tapping into His resources. So the question is, what will you do? You see, it's time to make a commitment. Now, this commitment should not be taken lightly. Ecclesiastes 5 says this: when you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. That's from Ecclesiastes, the wisest man that ever lived. Solomon says that, hey, if you're not going to do it, don't agree to it. That is perfectly fine. That is between you and God. But if you do agree to it, then make sure you commit and make it happen. Don't make this commitment if you don't plan on keeping it. And I know we forget sometimes, and again, that's why I recommend giving online, but I'm talking about your intention, not your perfection. So here's what I am asking. In your bulletin, you have one of these cards. In your bulletin, you have one of these cards. And on the card, as I said last week, is this. It says, I choose to be responsible with the resources and riches God has entrusted to me, praising God for his incredible love and generosity. And we're asking that you will mark one of these 4 options. Obedience. I will start tithing to my church each week. That means you're not currently tithing. Again, a tithe is 10%. If you make $100 a week and you were giving 5, but you've decided to give 10 each week, then you would be tithing at that point. I will continue to tithe to my church each week. That means you're going to continue on in faithfulness and do what God has asked you to do. Then over on generosity, it says, I will start giving above the tithe to my church each week. So let's say you make $100 a week, you've been given 10, and you're going to say, I'm going to give 11 now. And I'm going to let God continue to grow me. I know a family at my home church that every year it was their commitment to increase their giving to the church by 1%. And at this point, they are giving over 50% of their income because that was their commitment to giving into God. But I will start giving above the tithe, or I will continue. Maybe you've been giving $11 on that 100 every week for a long time now, and you're going to keep doing it because you know how God has blessed you, and you know what's been going on in your life. And so here's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to make that decision. Now, again, if you need some more time, you need to talk to your spouse, that's fine. But if you already know, then we're asking you to mark one of those and sign it and print, and then you're going to keep the other half. You see these tear apart in 2, and you'll keep the other half in your Bible. And this is for anybody who calls SHCC your home church. We're asking you to fill it. You can drop it in the offering plate. You can drop it in the boxes in the back whenever you leave. But here's all we're going to do with those cards. This is it. This is so that you've written it down that you're going to make a commitment. In a couple of weeks, we're going to give you the totals. That's it. We're not going to say, hey, Joe Schmo that's sitting next to you, he's not tithing. That's not what this is for. This is so that we can tell you, you know what? We had 10 people decide to make the commitment to tithe for the first time. Praise God. We have 50 people who have said they're going to continue to tithe. Praise God. And we're going to go through each of those and just give you the numbers. That's why we're doing it, so that you make a commitment. And as I said before, it helps when we sign our name, and you can fill that out and drop it in the box. But here's what I do know. I know making the decision to give back to God will change your life for the positive. Malachi 3:10, remember? He said, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. And when we give back to God, then we are opening up ourselves to God's blessing in all areas of our life, and I encourage you to do that today. We're going to do something a little different. Normally, I begin to talk about base, and you close your Bible and get your notes ready to leave. I get it. That's normally what we do. Here's what we're going to do today. Instead, we're going to pray in just a minute. And we're going to pray for our decisions on our finances. We're going to pray to God to bless us mightily, and we're going to pray that God will allow us to be a church that is making a difference in our community because of our faithfulness to Him. And while we're praying, I want you to pray. Pray about your commitment during this time. What are you going to do, and that God will help you continue it? And after I pray, we're still going to have our song of invitation. If you want to come up, make a decision, give your life to Jesus, I'd love to talk to you about that. But we're also going to have some prayer partners. And maybe you want to pray with them. Maybe you're still struggling with this commitment, trying to decide what you want to do. But maybe you just need more prayer for it, because here's the deal. This commitment can be scary. If you've never tithed before and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to look. It can be tough and it can be scary. But here, we are here to pray with you about anything. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pray, and we're going to ask God's power into our steps of faithfulness. And then after that, we'll have our song of invitation in just a few minutes, and then you can come up and pray with our prayer partners as well. So let's pray right now.